outcome is something that many in the Victorian community will find frustrating, but I want to make absolutely clear, no one is receiving special treatment.
The champ is here!
Tennis Australia and the Vic government in damage control today after these words set the tennis world alight overnight.
Today I'm heading down under with an exemption permission. Let's go 2022.
And with that, 9-time Australian Open winner Novak Djokovic was on his way here to play. The known anti-vaxxer granted a medical exemption despite this assurance last October.
The notion of you getting in here without being vaccinated, I think, is very, very low.
Today, the PM lobbed it back to the state.
Well, that is a matter for the Victorian government. They have provided him with an exemption to come to Australia. And so we then act in accordance with that decision.
For the millions of Aussies who've been separated from family through lockdowns, lost loved ones, and rolled up their sleeves 2 or 3 times, this isn't the news they were expecting.
I believe him coming in is an absolute joke.
I think it's a disgrace.
It's favouritism.
We've all got vaccinated, we've all done the right thing to help each other, and he just walks in and does as he pleases.
Doesn't pass the pub test, I suppose.
It makes no sense to me, and I don't think it'll make any sense to those healthcare workers who are working their guts out each and every day.
And we completely understand and empathise with people being upset about the fact that Novak has come in because of his statements over the past couple of years around vaccination.
Social media was awash with words like farcical, disgraceful, obscene and fair dinkum. Even fellow players were squinting their eyes, you know, in the way you do when something's not quite right.
I think if it was me that wasn't vaccinated, I wouldn't be getting an exemption. And that's, you know, but...
Look, I just think it's just very interesting. That's all I'm going to say.
At the end of the day, you kind of have to trust that he does have a valid reason.
Tennis Australia today stressed that Novak's medical exemption was granted by 2 independent panels of experts.
They're considered by not one doctor that you know, but 6 doctors that you don't.
There were blind applicants that were received. In other words, no one knew who the applicant was.
ATAGI guidelines for medical exemptions for unvaccinated visitors to Australia list ailments like inflamed hearts, adverse reactions to previous vaccines and mental health disorders. Being a world #1 ranked athlete at the top of his game, it's hard to know which of these conditions applies to Novak. Exemptions can, however, be granted for people who've contracted COVID-19 in the past 6 months. But again, we might never know the answer unless Novak himself spills the beans.
I think it'll certainly be helpful if Novak was to explain the conditions which he's sought an exemption, but ultimately it's up to him.
Until then, Australia seethes.
A massive slap in the face for everyone that's done the right thing.
I can't imagine there'll be a lot of support for him in the stands or on the streets or in the hotels or anywhere he goes.
I guess he might even get booed when he gets up onto the court.
If eggs get thrown in the court, great.
I hope he gets put out in the first round.
I think it's an absolute disgrace and I won't be watching it.
Don't call it a comeback!
And we're hearing early reports that Margaret Court is very relieved she won't be the least popular person at the Rugby Arena. So that's good news for somebody.
I think it was pretty obvious there was always going to be more to this story because there's so much we didn't know. But actually tonight, as we are aware, the Border Force Commissioner, the Acting Commissioner, is saying that there's an issue with Novak's travel declaration for Australia. And the Home Affairs Minister, Karen Andrews, has issued a statement basically saying that no individual competing at the Oz Open will be afforded special treatment. Border Force will continue to ensure that those who arrive at our border comply with our requirements. And just to sort of circle back to what the government's saying, if an arriving individual is not vaccinated, they must provide acceptable proof that they cannot be vaccinated.
So is that a suggestion that the Victorian government is accepting it, but the federal government aren't?
As far as I understand it, the Commonwealth government has control of our borders. So I don't think the Victorian government doesn't decide who comes to this country.
So the story is far from over.
There's a lot more to come.
I mean, is it possible that he does have a legitimate reason? Like maybe he's had COVID recently?
So, one of the reasons, as I understand it, that you can get an exemption under the ATAGI rules is if you've had COVID within the last 6 months. We don't know whether...
He did pull out of a tournament, I think, in Indianapolis not that long ago.
So it's possible.
Yeah.
And don't forget that the 2 panels that he went through, so one is a Tennis Australia appointed panel, the other is a Victorian government appointed panel, did blind assessments. So they didn't know who they were looking at.
The problem is no one cared today. I think everyone knows someone who's really suffered through COVID, if not many, many, many people. We know people who've lost loved ones who weren't there to say goodbye to them. And in the end, people are just sick of superstars being given special treatment, and that's the category that this looked to fall into. And it probably didn't help, Novak, that you were lacking a bit of grace in your announcement of the whole thing. It was all a bit, let's go.
So you're supporting Rafa too, I take it?
And if he does come, instead of throwing his sweatbands at, he throw out rapid antigen tests. Rapid antigen tests, everybody!
Mate, there's not many of those going around. You can't be throwing them just yet.
They were fake ones. I wasn't really throwing rapid antigen tests.